The 10 Commandments of the Bible Explained. In this video, we will explore the 10 Commandments of the Bible, a moral guide for a fulfilling life. Discover the meaning and relevance of each commandment and how they can be applied in our daily lives. Join us on this journey of reflection and discovery of timeless moral principles. Commandment number 1. You shall have no other gods before me. The commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me," is the first of the 10 commandments found in the Old Testament of the Bible. It is a directive that establishes the exclusivity of the worship of a single God and prohibits idolatry and the veneration of other gods. This commandment has its origin in the historical context in which it was given, when the people of Israel were coming out of slavery in Egypt and preparing to enter the Promised Land. At that time, most of the cultures around them worshipped multiple gods and practiced idolatry. However, God wanted to establish a special and unique relationship with the people of Israel, and therefore He gave them this commandment to prevent them from falling into the temptation of worshiping other gods. The importance of this commandment lies in the fact that God presents Himself as the only true, supreme, and worshipable God. By demanding that no other gods be placed before Him, God is establishing a relationship of faithfulness and exclusive loyalty with His people. This commandment is also related to other commandments that prohibit the making and worship of idols, since these false gods can divert attention and devotion that is due exclusively to God. In biblical times, the worship of alien gods often involved immoral practices and pagan rituals. Idolatry led to moral and spiritual corruption, since false gods promoted values and behaviors contrary to God's principles and teachings. Therefore, the commandment not to have other gods before God also seeks to preserve the moral and spiritual integrity of the people. This commandment not only applies to the worship of physical idols, but also to anything that can take the place of God in a person's life. It can refer to the worship of wealth, power, fame, success, or any other object or idea that becomes the center of life and is placed above God. In that sense, the commandment also urges us to prioritize God in all areas of our lives and not allow anyone or anything to take His place as our highest authority and source of worship. Furthermore, this commandment reminds us that God is jealous and demands absolute loyalty. He does not tolerate sharing His glory with any other god or entity. By establishing exclusivity in worship, God is calling us to maintain an intimate and dedicated relationship with Him, acknowledging His supremacy and dominion over all things. Commandment number 2. You shall not make an image, nor any likeness of what is in heaven above, nor on the earth below, nor in the waters under the earth. You will not bow down to them, nor will you honor them. The commandment, "You shall not make an image, nor any likeness of what is in heaven above, nor on the earth below, nor in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor shall you honor them," is the second of the 10 commandments given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai, according to the book of Exodus in the Bible. This commandment has profound implications and has been the subject of interpretation and reflection throughout history. First of all, it is important to understand the context in which this commandment was given. The Israelites had just been freed from slavery in Egypt and were in the process of establishing themselves as a God-led nation. In that context, the surrounding societies worshipped numerous gods and often represented these gods in the form of images or statues. These images were considered objects of worship and were believed to represent the divine presence and power. The commandment not to make images is related to the central concept of monotheism, the belief in one God. By prohibiting the creation and worship of images, God was making a clear distinction between the worship of false gods and the worship of the one true God. This commandment emphasizes the importance of spiritual worship rather than material or physical worship. The prohibition against making images is also related to the danger of idolatry. Idolatry involves placing trust and devotion in something created instead of the Creator. By creating and worshiping images, one runs the risk of attributing to these human or material representations a divine power that belongs only to God. Instead, the commandment calls us to focus our worship and devotion directly on God, without intermediaries or physical representations. Furthermore, the commandment reminds us that God is transcendent and cannot be reduced or pigeonholed in any human form or image. Trying to represent God in an image or likeness is to limit and reduce the greatness and infinity of the Supreme Being. God transcends all human forms and categories, and is much bigger and more powerful than any representation we can create. Therefore, the commandment urges us to have spiritual worship and a direct relationship with God, without the need for physical intermediaries. We should not rely on images or statues to connect with the divine, but rather seek God's presence in our lives through prayer, meditation, and the practice of faith. By refraining from making images and worshiping idols, we are invited to a deeper and more meaningful worship, based on faith and personal relationship with God. It is important to note that this commandment does not prohibit all forms of art or visual representation. He is not opposed to the creation of works of art, sculptures, or graphic representations in themselves. Rather, it warns us about the worship and veneration of these representations as if they were deities or divine intermediaries. Commandment number 3. You shall not take the name of Jehovah your God in vain. The commandment, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, is the third of the commandments given by God to the people of Israel in the Bible. It is found in the Old Testament, specifically in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 7. Although it was given to the ancient Hebrew community, its message transcends time and is still relevant to many people today. This commandment is part of a set of divine rules intended to establish a moral guide for humanity and promote a proper relationship between God and people. In particular, the third commandment addresses the issue of respect and reverence for God's name. By understanding its meaning and applying it to our lives, we can gain a better understanding of its purpose and value. First of all, we must understand that the name of God in the Bible represents His character, authority, and divine presence. Jehovah is a sacred and special name, representing the supreme and almighty God. Taking God's name in vain means using it disrespectfully, frivolously, or without a legitimate purpose. This includes irreverent use in false oaths, blasphemy, cursing, or any other act that trivializes or dishonors God's name. The importance of this commandment lies in the fact that God is holy and deserves our respect and reverence. Using His name irresponsibly or dishonorably shows a lack of regard for His divine character and can damage our relationship with Him. As human beings, we must be mindful of our words and actions, recognizing that we have a responsibility to honor God at all times. Additionally, the commandment not to take God's name in vain also has implications for our interactions with others. Our language and behavior reflect our faith and values, and when we use God's name inappropriately, we can also offend and hurt those who share our faith. As Christians or believers, we must be examples of respect and love towards God and towards our fellow men. To fulfill this commandment, we must be aware of our words and attitudes. It means that we should avoid swearing or using God's name lightly or insincerely. It also involves avoiding blasphemous or malicious expressions that dishonor God. Instead, we should strive to use God's name respectfully, in times of worship, prayer, praise, and witness to our faith. Also, taking God's name seriously leads us to recognize His greatness and majesty. He invites us to deepen our relationship with Him, seek His will, and honor Him in all our actions. By living according to this commandment, We cultivate an attitude of reverence and fear toward God, which allows us to experience a deeper and more meaningful relationship with Him. Commandment number 4. Remember the day of rest, to sanctify it. The commandment, remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy, is the fourth of the 10 commandments found in the Bible, specifically in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 8. This commandment refers to the importance of dedicating a day to rest and honor God. The Sabbath, also known as Saturday, is considered a holy day in many religious traditions, including Judaism and Christianity. The commandment states that we must remember and take into account this special day, and that we must keep it holy, that is, make it sacred and set apart for God. The idea of having a day of Sabbath and worship dates back to the biblical accounts of the book of Genesis, where it is said that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th day. This rest of God serves as an example for humanity, inviting us to follow His example and spend a day in rest and worship. The commandment to remember the Sabbath has various purposes and meanings. First of all, it urges us to take a break regularly. Today's pace of life can be hectic and exhausting, and the commandment reminds us of the importance of taking time to rest physically and mentally. It is a reminder that we should not be constantly busy and overwhelmed by the worries and responsibilities of daily life, but rather find a balance between work and rest. In addition, the Sabbath also invites us to worship and honor God. By setting aside a specific day for worship, we acknowledge and celebrate the presence and importance of God in our lives. It is a time to reflect on His creation, His love and mercy, and to connect with Him spiritually. In Jewish tradition, the Sabbath begins at sundown on Friday and ends at sundown on Saturday. During this time, religious ceremonies are held, synagogue is attended, prayers are recited, and Torah is studied. Certain activities considered prohibited work are avoided, such as lighting a fire, cooking, shopping, or traveling long distances. In Christianity, the Sabbath has been moved to Sunday, in commemoration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Christians view Sunday as Lord's Day, a special day for communal worship and spiritual reflection. It is important to note that Sabbath observance can vary according to different religious beliefs and traditions. Some religious groups may strictly follow specific rules and restrictions, while others may adapt them according to their own practices and circumstances. Commandment number 5. Honor your father and your mother. The commandment, honor your father and your mother, is the 5th of the 10 commandments given by God to Moses in the Old Testament of the Bible. This commandment is found in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 12, and is also mentioned in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 5, verse 16. Although it sounds simple and direct, this commandment carries with it a profound meaning and has implications for both individuals as well as for society as a whole. First of all, honoring father and mother means recognizing the special and unique role they play in our lives. Parents are responsible for bringing us into the world, caring for us, educating us, and providing us with love and support throughout our upbringing. Honoring our parents means showing them gratitude and respect for all they have done and continue to do for us. This implies recognizing their authority and following their teachings and advice, as long as they are aligned with ethical and moral principles. However, honoring father and mother goes beyond blind obedience. It also involves treating our parents with love, compassion, and understanding. As we get older, it's natural for us to become more independent and make our own decisions. However, this does not mean that we should belittle or devalue the opinions and experiences of our parents. Honoring our parents means listening to their views with respect and consideration, even if we disagree with them. Also, honoring father and mother has a positive impact on society as a whole. The family is considered the basic cell of society, and a healthy and respectful relationship between parents and children is essential for the proper functioning of the community. When we honor our parents, we are strengthening family ties and fostering an atmosphere of love and harmony at home. This has a cascading effect, as a society based on mutual respect and family values tends to be more stable and cohesive. In the Christian tradition, honoring father and mother is also linked to the larger concept of honoring God. Parents are seen as instruments of divine will in bringing life into the world and being responsible for the upbringing and education of their children. Therefore, honoring parents becomes a way of honoring and thanking God for His love and care. However, it is important to recognize that this commandment does not justify or promote parental abuse or neglect. Honor towards parents should not be understood as a justification for tolerating harmful or abusive behavior. While it is important to treat our parents with respect, we must also protect ourselves and others from any form of abuse. In cases of abuse or dangerous situations, it is essential to seek help and protection. Commandment number 6. You shall not kill. The commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," is one of the fundamental and universal principles present in the Bible, specifically in the Old Testament, and has been recognized as an essential value in many societies and cultures throughout the world. This sixth commandment is found in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, as part of the 10 Commandments given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. The commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," is a clear and forceful expression that prohibits the act of taking the life of another human being unjustly or deliberately. However, it is important to note that this commandment should not be interpreted in an absolute way, since the Bible itself contains situations where the use of violence or war is justified in certain contexts, such as in self-defense or in the protection of others. To fully understand the meaning and importance of the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," it is necessary to analyze it in its historical and cultural context. In the ancient society in which it was written, violence and murder were woefully common, and this commandment was presented as a moral guide to setting boundaries and protecting human life as a sacred gift. The prohibition against killing not only covers the physical action of taking the life of another human being, but also extends to the intention and attitudes that lead to violence. In the New Testament, Jesus elaborates on this commandment, teaching that not only the act of murder is condemnable, but also the anger and hatred in the hearts of people. Jesus calls his followers to love his enemies and to seek reconciliation instead of revenge. In addition to its moral implication, the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," also has legal and social implications. In most modern societies, murder is considered a serious crime and is punishable by law. This is due in part to the influence of the Judeo-Christian heritage and ethical principles derived from the Bible. The teaching of the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," has implications beyond the murder itself. It promotes respect for the dignity and intrinsic worth of every human being, regardless of their race, religion, gender, or any other characteristic. It calls us to treat others with love, compassion, and justice, recognizing that we are all equally deserving of respect and protection. The commandment also invites us to consider our actions and decisions in relation to life and death. It challenges us to seek alternatives to violence and to work for peace, reconciliation, and justice in our personal interactions and in our communities. This implies addressing the root causes of violence, such as poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunities, and promoting the construction of a more just and peaceful society. Commandment number 7. You shall not commit adultery. The commandment, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," is the 7th of the 10 commandments found in the Bible and is a moral guideline that prohibits illicit relationships and marital infidelity. It can first be found in the Old Testament book of Exodus, and has been widely interpreted and applied in various religious traditions and cultures throughout the world. In its most basic form, Adultery refers to having relations with someone who is not your spouse or partner. However, its meaning has evolved over the centuries and varies in different cultural and religious contexts. The prohibition against adultery is based on the belief that marriage is a sacred institution and that infidelity breaks fidelity and trust in that relationship. The reason behind this commandment is found in the importance of stability and family unity. Spousal infidelity can have a devastating impact on a relationship, causing emotional pain, destroying trust, and destabilizing the home. Additionally, adultery can result in legal and social consequences, such as divorce, loss of child custody, and social stigma. In a broader sense, the commandment, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," also refers to the idea of being faithful and loyal in all our relationships. This includes the importance of being honest and respectful of our commitments, both in marriage and in other areas of life, such as friendship, work, and community. The interpretation of this commandment has been the subject of debate and controversy throughout history. Some stricter interpretations consider adultery a serious sin that deserves punishment, even the death penalty in some ancient cultures. Other interpretations focus more on the importance of reconciliation and forgiveness in case of infidelity, seeking to restore the relationship and strengthen family ties. It is important to note that the interpretation and application of the commandments may vary depending on religious tradition and individual beliefs. Some people may interpret this commandment more strictly and literally, while others may take a more contextual and comprehensive perspective. Commandment number 8. You shall not steal. The commandment, "Thou shalt not steal," is the 8th of the 10 commandments found in the Bible and is a moral directive that prohibits the act of stealing or unfairly taking possession of what rightfully belongs to another person. It is a fundamental principle in the context of ethics and morality, and has been widely accepted in both religious traditions and secular cultures around the world. The idea behind the commandment not to steal is based on the recognition of the value and dignity of property and the importance of respecting the rights and autonomy of others. Private property is a central concept in many societies, as it provides security, stability, and the ability to exercise control over resources and assets that have been legitimately acquired. Theft, on the other hand, undermines these principles and creates an environment of mistrust and conflict. The commandment is not limited solely to the physical act of taking possession of another person's property without their consent, but also applies to other forms of theft or fraud. This includes deception, fraud, extortion, embezzlement, hacking, misappropriation of intellectual property, and any other form of dishonest acquisition of tangible or intangible property. The commandment not to steal also extends beyond financial transactions and applies to any form of injustice or exploitation that deprives others of their legitimate rights or remedies. This includes labor exploitation, human trafficking, slavery, and any other form of oppression in which people are deprived of their dignity and freedom. In addition to its ethical and moral importance, the commandment not to steal also has legal and social implications. Theft is considered a crime in most legal systems, and the punishment for theft can range from financial penalties to prison terms, depending on the seriousness of the crime and the laws of the country in question. This commandment is also fundamental to the functioning of economies, since trust in the respect of private property is a key component for trade and investment. In a broader sense, the commandment not to steal is based on the principle of treating others as we would like to be treated ourselves. By respecting the property and rights of others, we promote justice, equality, and peaceful coexistence in society. It also encourages solidarity and generosity, since by refraining from taking what does not belong to us, we are free to share and help those who are in legitimate need. Commandment number 9. You will not bear false witness against your neighbor. The commandment, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor," is found in the book of Exodus in the Bible and is part of the 10 Commandments, which are a set of fundamental ethical and moral principles in the Judeo-Christian tradition. This 9th commandment is found in Exodus chapter 20 verse 16 and is also mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 5 verse 20. In its most basic form, the commandment prohibits the issuance of false or lying testimony against another person, especially in a legal or judicial context. However, its scope goes further and applies to all forms of communication and interpersonal relationships. The commandment seeks to establish a standard of honesty, truthfulness, and respect for others. The commandment specifically addresses the relationship with neighbor, which refers to anyone with whom we associate in society. This includes our neighbors, friends, family members, and any individual with whom we interact. The word neighbor implies a relationship of closeness and solidarity, and the commandment reminds us of the importance of treating others with respect and justice. In a broader sense, the commandment also calls us to be aware of the consequences of our words and actions. Often, false testimonials can cause harm to the affected person. They can lead to defamation, slander, and the destruction of someone's reputation. By issuing a false testimony, we are violating the trust and integrity that we should have in our relationships with others. In addition to prohibiting false testimonies, this commandment also invites us to be fair and just in our relationships with others. It urges us to seek truth, fairness, and honesty in all of our interactions. This means that we must avoid intentional misrepresentation of facts, manipulation of information, and any other form of deception or misrepresentation. The commandment also has broader implications for the way we relate to others. It calls us to be respectful and charitable towards others, avoiding gossip, slander, and any form of speaking ill of others. It reminds us that our words have power and can influence the lives of others, so we must use them responsibly and constructively. Commandment number 10. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that belongs to your neighbor. The commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's, is found in the book of Exodus, the 10th of the 10 commandments that God gave to the people of Israel through Moses. This commandment is found in chapter 20, verse 17, and has great ethical and moral relevance in the Judeo-Christian tradition. The commandment not to covet is designed to teach people to live with an attitude of contentment and gratitude toward what they have, and to avoid envy and craving for the possessions and relationships of others. Coveting means yearning or intensely wanting something that belongs to another person, and can be considered a sin because it can lead to negative attitudes and actions, such as stealing, cheating, or destroying peace and harmony in relationships. Your neighbor's house symbolizes your property and material well-being, while your neighbor's wife refers to your marital relationship. In addition, other elements such as the servant, the maid, the ox, and the donkey are mentioned, which were considered valuable in the agricultural society of the time. These elements represent the different aspects of life and the possessions of others that can awaken desire and envy in the hearts of people. The commandment not to covet calls us to focus on our own lives and blessings, rather than constantly worrying about what others have. It invites us to cultivate an attitude of contentment and appreciation for our own possessions, and to recognize that each person has their own path and blessings in life. It also exhorts us to respect the property and relationships of others, avoiding any form of greed, envy, or excessive desire. In the Christian interpretation, Jesus expanded the scope of this commandment during his teaching, emphasizing that we should not only refrain from acting on the basis of greed, but also from harboring impure thoughts and desires in our hearts. Jesus taught that sin originates in the human heart and that it is important to maintain inner purity in our thoughts and motivations.